All right, so in the previous unit, we studied the method of interest-based negotiations through the book of Getting to Yes. And from the feedback I gathered from you through the discussion board and other ways, many of you have found it to be a good method and something that you may try to use in the future. However, there were a number of you who brought up the questions of what if? What do I do if I try to use it, but the other side doesn't? What do I do if, even though I try to stay focused on the interest, the other side is just positional and attacking me and using dirty tricks and doing all of those things? And so, in a way, and I think one of you have brought it up as well, this is the question more generally of what do you do when you are negotiating with terrorists? This can be actual terror hostage situation, but it can also be just the idea of negotiating with somebody who is refusing to play the game that you are playing and refusing to follow what you would consider to be acceptable norms of disagreement and tries to use different tactics and different ideas. And so the last part of the book, as well as the TED Talk that I had you watch, try to focus on that, on those questions and what can you do. And I want to go over a few things here, and then I'm asking you in the discussion board again to say, okay, what do you think about that? Are those good solutions? Would that help you get out of those more iffy situations? So the number one advice that Getting to Yes is giving you is that even if you are dealing with a negotiator that seems to be playing not fair, is that you need to focus on your own interests and make sure that you are protecting yourself. One way to do that is to decide ahead of time on a bottom line. The bottom line can be the highest price you're going to pay or the lowest price you're going to accept. It can be the most territorial concessions you're willing to make, or anything along these lines, but kind of have that in mind, and this is my best and final offer, right? The advantage of using that is that you will not be kind of getting on the inertia of negotiating and making some concessions and then work yourself into a situation that you do not want to be in. That in hindsight you'll be like, oh, why did I give up so much on what I wanted to do here, right? And so to avoid that risk, if you have that bottom line, even if you gave it to a broker, right? If we're talking about a house purchasing, you can tell your broker, okay, I'm willing to pay as high as $200,000, not a penny more. So the broker knows they can go as high as that, but not above that. And so you will not be talked into paying more than what you are absolutely can or absolutely willing to. And that's an advantage. But the disadvantage is that this provides you with a rigid line and less flexibility and also less of an open mind to hear some creative or imaginative options that could bring up solutions that you didn't think about at the beginning. And here you can think about things like using issue linkage or timing or all of those things that we discussed before. Maybe I can pay a little bit more if we spread it over a longer time of payments, right? or maybe I am willing to pay more if I am also getting the snowblower that sits in the shed right now. And so if you are just sticking with this bottom line rigid set, your mind is closed to those ideas, and that's a disadvantage. A better way is to define ahead of time what the book is calling your BATNA. Your BATNA is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In other words, what is your plan B? What are you going to do if the negotiations fail and you cannot agree on whatever it is that you are negotiating on? And instead of using a bottom line as your yardstick, you need to use your BATNA as the yardstick to measure the alternatives or to measure different proposals that come up in the negotiations. Keep asking yourself, is this proposal still better than my alternative, than my best alternative? Can I just walk away now and use my best alternative instead? And here you can really test those new creative and imaginative ideas that you didn't think about ahead of time. And so you are open to hear one more offer, one more proposal, knowing in your mind that you're not just going to be talked into a situation you don't like, because you are going to take each one of those proposals, offers, demand statements, and test it vis-a-vis your BATNA. Okay? This is why the book is saying that if you are approaching a negotiation without predefining or thinking with yourself what is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, if you're going in without a BATNA, you're kind of negotiating with your eyes closed, because you are not sure if any given proposal is really good for you or not. Only if you can test it against your plan B, against what am I doing if negotiations fail, can you give a clear or clearer answer about, okay, yes, this is better, or no, it's really not better, so I should stick with my BATNA. Now, a BATNA should be specific. You should know exactly what is it, what is your plan B. And don't leave it as abstract or in the aggregate, such as, oh, I can always have other options. Think about a job negotiations or negotiations on employment, right? So you may be telling yourself, I always have a second option. I can always apply to a different job or move to a different market or go back to school. But unless you looked into all of those other options and define to yourself, okay, I'm going into those negotiations, give it your all because I really want this job. However, if not, then I already applied or I already identified a school that I'm applying to and I know how much it's going to cost and that's okay with me. This is a detailed and well-defined BATNA. A not good one is a one that just say, well, you know, I always have other options. So don't fall into that trap, because you may have some sort of false optimism. Because maybe if you haven't checked if there's really a program you want to apply for graduate school in your area, maybe all of the programs that are available are way too expensive. Maybe they only open cohorts every 2 years, right? All of those things could happen, and so you thought you have that second option, but it's not there. So first, really define what is that your second option, and make sure you kind of build that plan B, or at least lay the groundwork for that plan B, that you can fall back on it. And you can still use kind of a bottom line type situation by having a tripwire. So saying, okay, in these employment negotiations, I'm willing to accept as low as 100 grand annually. But I started and negotiated at 130. If we get to 110, then I need to stop, ask for a pause, and go back and rethink my BATNA and rethink my options before I step back in. And so in that way, what you actually did is it's not a bottom line as I'm not talking after that anymore. It's not an automatic out, but it is a way to say, okay, I need to stop, pause, rethink my options, then we can come back and negotiate. A strong BATNA makes you a much more powerful negotiator. Now you can do things like acknowledge it explicitly, say out loud. If you see that things don't go your way, say out loud. If we don't get to an agreement, I already applied to graduate school and I'm ready to leave. So show that you do have a plan B and show that you are serious about it and you're ready to take it if things don't work the way that you want it. You should also think or try to imagine what is the BATNA of the other side. That will give you a lot of information about the range of possibilities that you are working with towards the win set. And so when you are trying to protect yourself and evaluate the proposals, are those proposals really good for me? And not fall into the trap of positional bargaining, then you should develop and hold and acknowledge a really strong and good BATNA. Now, having all of that, even if you develop your BATNA and all of those things, then you can still end up in a situation that they won't play. You ask them questions, you try to separate the people from their positions, you are focusing on the interest and inventing options and using criteria and having a BATNA, but the other side seems to be just attacking you, coming up with ridiculous offers. And so what do you do in those situations? What do you do when they don't play? The number one advice is to try and keep with the method of interest-based negotiations. Try to continue and focus on the steps and the methods that you learn in getting to yes. And hopefully that will be somewhat contagious and will attract the other side to speak the same language. Maybe they're not trained in that, maybe they have a different type of experience, but by sticking to it and maintaining the course, you might be able to attract them in. Sometimes that won't work. And here is where we should use what's called negotiation jiu-jitsu. This idea that you are using the power of your opponent or the inertia of your opponent to benefit yourself, right? In jiu-jitsu, one very well-known move is that when somebody comes at you with two hands to push you, you shouldn't be pushing back. Instead, you should just swivel your body a little bit and they will fly forward and land on their face, right? So this is a similar way. The number one rule is that if they attack your position, don't push back. If they insist strongly on their position, don't push back. And if they attack you, once again, don't push back. Instead, try to do things that would take away the power or use their power and their insistence to move the negotiation back to where you want them to go. Now, number one, what you can do here is that treat every position, every offer as an option. Even if it's ridiculous, even if you know that you'll never agree to it, entertain it, talk about it, ask questions about it, and try to ask questions that would let you know what are the interests of the other side. Ask them about their budgetary concern and their procedural concerns and how much power do they have? Can they make decision today? Do they have to go back and ask somebody for permission? Entertain every option, but ask a lot of questions. Get a lot of information from them and try to get at their interest. Again, not at their position, right? And the same way is that if they attack your position, instead of just defending yourself, you should ask questions. Ask them, why are you rejecting it? What's wrong with it? And invite them to help you. How can I change or develop my position to better fit what you have in mind? In that way, you are not divorcing yourself from your position, but you are talking on the merits of your proposal or your position instead of just kind of back and forth, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, right? Now, if they attack you, let them. Try to swallow that frog and let them, and then try to flip it back on the problem, right? Try to hear between the lines what they really care of, and continue to ask questions rather than making statements. So don't just make a statement or tell them what you think. Instead, ask questions. And after you ask a question, pause, wait, allow for silence. One good way to do is to have a cup of beverage next to you. And even if it's empty, every time you ask a question, you go take a sip. Or you just sit there and look them in the eyes and wait until they talk. That will roll the ball back into their court. And many times your counterpart will feel that now they have to talk. They have to do something. So using all of those different methods, what we did here is that instead of pushing back, somebody push on me, I'm going to push back, and we're going to go into brinkmanship, right? Head-to-head conflict. Instead of that, I'm moving away, and they're going to get out of the way, or their power is going to go against thin air, against nothing. And so try to divert the situation back to focusing on the interest, on the merits of the problem, on real criteria, and all of those things. And if all that fails, if keeping to the methods and using negotiation jiu-jitsu doesn't work, you can bring in a trained third party. It's got to be a trained third party. It's got to be somebody who knows how to deal with difficult situations. And then the book provides you with this one-text procedure where you don't talk directly to each other, but you talk to the third-party negotiation, and they don't ask you to give up anything or to give any concessions. Instead, they give you written proposals and you have to criticize it, and they go back into the drafting board and try to get your comments from the other side and come up with draft number 2. And again, ask you to criticize the draft, ask the other side to criticize the draft. You know, by doing that, they actually making you focus on the problem and work side by side on the problem rather than attacking each other. But that's what a well-trained third party can do for you. Now, sometimes you will find negotiators who will be using dirty tricks, such as, sitting in a meeting for 2 hours with closed doors where the room is fairly warm and they don't give you any breaks, or they don't serve even water on the table, or they have you sit with the sun in your eyes, or they keep on every time you bring up a proposal that sounds good, they say, well, I will accept it, but I have to go back to get a permission from somebody else. And this is a dirty trick, because why are you even negotiating with me if you don't have the authority to make a concession? And so the last chapter in the book actually goes on and gives you a lot of examples of those dirty tricks. And those will happen. And again, a good way to deal with them is to recognize them. Number one is that you need to recognize that it's not a coincidence that in the room with one window and the sun going right into it, you are the one sitting in front of it, and that there's no shade on the window, right? So recognize it between you and yourself at least, right? And then bring it up explicitly. Say out loud, you know, the temperature here is really warm. I feel uncomfortable. If we cannot take a break or cannot control the temperature in the room, I think we need to break for the day. So don't let them keep you hostage. Bring it up explicitly, again, not by attacking them, but by focusing on the issue, focusing on the problem, and negotiate over it. Can we move to a different room? Maybe we can turn on the air condition. Can we take a 10-minute break and come back, right? So recognize, bring it up, and negotiate over it. And when you're doing that, when you are bringing it up and negotiating over it, make sure once again to focus on the tactic, focus on the problem, and not on the person who's carrying it. Don't come up and say, oh, you probably closed us in this warm room, so I'll sweat it out and just want to leave. No, just say, it is warm in here, can we turn on the air condition, right? So you are not, again, you're not making it personal, you're making it, this is not acceptable, or the tactic is not acceptable. And then you need to bring up ideas and proposals that go against that tactic. So just saying this room is really warm is one step, but the next step will be is to come up with ideas. Can we open a window? Can we turn on the AC? Can we open the door? Can we move to another room? Right? So bring up ideas that counterattack that specific tactic. And then again, think about criteria and fairness. You know, if we're talking about seating arrangements and you're sitting in front of the window with the sun, say, all right, I'll sit here for now, but can we switch seats every 10 minutes, right? So nobody has nobody's under the sun for too long. And then always remember that you have your batna and you can walk away. But don't just throw around this idea of, okay, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to walk away. Walk away when you're ready to do it. Walk away when everything else failed. That is still an option. And you should know that, and the other side should know that as well. Now, the book then goes in to give you specific examples of how to deal with some situations. And you should certainly look into that as well. All right, so these are the ways where you can deal with a partner, with a negotiation counterparty that will not play the same game as you and will not focus on interest-based negotiations. This is how you can counter that. This is how you can try and bring to the negotiations to where you want them to do. And so in the discussion board, I'm asking you to say, do you think those countermeasures can work or not? And something else to remember is that at the end of the day, we need to remain in reality And know that some situation will not be solved by any negotiation, even if it's the best negotiator ever.